It is outrageous that in this country, where we supposedly have democracy and justice, that a man could be put to death because a petition was not filed on time.
I originally thought the issue was newly discovered evidence, but I realized it was much broader than that, because as I dug into the case, I realized that the defendant on death row, Kuenzel, was factually innocent, absolutely innocent.
So a convenience store clerk was killed on a rainy night in November 1987. She was killed with a single shotgun shot to her chest. There were no eyewitnesses to the murder, but we know that the murder happened between 11:05 and 11:20. In the hour preceding the murder, there were 10 witnesses who identified a gentleman named Harvey Venn as being at or around the convenience store. Bill Kuenzel was Harvey's roommate at the time, and that was really his only connection to the case. The other piece of incriminating evidence that the police used was the fact that Harvey Venn had the victim's blood splattered on his pants. He had no explanation for how the blood got there because there was no blood found anywhere outside of the store. Harvey was brought in for questioning on a Thursday night after the murder, and his initial story to the police was that he went to the store that night, but he had left by 10 or 10:30, and so he definitely wasn't there at the time of the murder, and hence he could not have committed it. At 2:30 in the morning on Sunday, Harvey Venn, who was only 18 at the time, changed his story and then told the police that, well, okay, I was there, but I was there with my roommate, and my roommate went inside the store, and my roommate did the murder, basically putting it all on Bill. Bill was called by the police and asked to come in later that afternoon, and he did voluntarily, and told the police, I had nothing to do with this. I was with Harvey earlier that day. We were roommates. We worked at the same factory, but Harvey dropped me off, and then I have no idea what he did. I was at home. There's not a single witness that places Billy at the store that night, except for one 16-year-old girl who was driving by that night in the rain and testifies that she saw both Harvey and Billy inside the store. And this is critical because the Alabama prosecutors were not allowed to convict Bill solely on Harvey Venn's say-so. There's a statute that says that, and there's a lot of good reason for that. Obviously, Harvey has the ultimate motivation to lie. And what was not revealed to the prosecution, and really not until 2010, was that this witness had told the grand jury that she couldn't see anything there apart from Harvey's car. But nevertheless, the prosecutor said to Billy, we know that you were there, we believe you were there, but we've got all this evidence against Harvey. So if you testify against Harvey, we will give you a deal for straight life, which at the time meant serving 8 years in prison. And Billy said, no, I'm not doing any time for something I didn't commit. And he stuck to that. The jury also didn't hear about Harvey's initial statements to the police, where he told the police who he was with that night, another gentleman who was not Billy. There's an enormous amount of evidence that just was withheld from the jury here, in our belief, because this prosecutor was more concerned about obtaining a conviction than he was about obtaining justice.
Well, I mean, it's the prosecutor's responsibility under Brady versus Maryland to turn over all relevant statements. And defense counsel, who's extremely inexperienced, never tried a death penalty case, asked for police interviews and grand jury minutes and did not receive them. And they did not come to light for 22 years.
After a day-and-a-half trial, Billy was found guilty and sentenced to death. And then he was put into the realm of post-conviction, which is after conviction. Alabama is the only state in the entire country that has a death penalty scheme, but does not provide defendants representation in post-conviction proceedings. So there needs to be something to fill that void, and that void is really through public interest service. And my predecessor at the time was looking to do something more and was paired with Billy Kuenzel and was told that this is a special case. So Duff went around and raised money from friends and family to conduct discovery, and that's what he did. And he started gathering an enormous amount of evidence that would help show that Billy was innocent and that this was an unjust conviction. Duff Dretson went and found the fact that Harvey's shotgun was actually the same shotgun as the murder weapon. He went and found Harvey Venn's girlfriend, who says, I saw Harvey that night, just before he went to the store. And by the way, he was messed up on drugs and he was completely alone. I know he was alone. The car door was open, the light was on. I saw that there was no one else in his car.
After several months, Duff came back to Billy and he said, I believe in you. I believe you're innocent. And Billy said, you're the first person who has ever believed in me in the system. And they formed a friendship that was quite extraordinary. I think that in some ways, Duff was like a father to him because he had a very difficult childhood. He was very poor. He lived in a two-room shack, as Duff described it, and he had a stepfather who had been in Vietnam 3 times and was an alcoholic and a wife batterer, and he had no opportunities. He dropped out of school in the 7th grade, and he went to work, and he got into some trouble, but he was never in anything violent. And he valued Duff's trust in him and belief in him.
So he worked very hard and prepared a post-conviction petition and submitted that post-conviction petition in October of 1993, which was within 2 years of when the United States Supreme Court had issued a certificate of judgment dismissing the direct appeal proceedings. But it was 2.5 years after the Alabama Supreme Court had dismissed the petition. And therein lies the procedural default that has haunted this case. Because of that 5.5-month discrepancy of filing, based on a miscalculation or a misinterpretation of what the words Supreme Court were referring to, the United States Supreme Court or the Alabama Supreme Court, Billy has been found to be procedurally defaulted. And what that means is that it doesn't matter if he had the most unconstitutional trial in the world. And in fact, I would make an argument that he does have one of those cases. But that doesn't matter. Because he missed that deadline, the courts aren't going to allow him to be there. It doesn't matter that the prosecutor withheld a raft of evidence.
Duff was totally dedicated to proving Billy's innocence. He would come home from Alabama sometimes, and he would be so excited about some evidence that he found. He said, this proves that he was innocent. He wasn't even at the scene of the crime. And he was totally frustrated because he could not present the evidence. And every time he would apply for a reversal of the petition and it was denied, it was just a terribly frustrating time. And then at one point, I think it was 12 years in, the petition was reversed. And there was great excitement in the family. And he thought that that would open the door to his being able to get post-conviction relief. But then it was reversed again, very soon thereafter. And I'm just sorry that he died without being able to see Billy free. He said in one of his letters, Billy's letters, he said, Duff talked about he talked about that big dinner we were all going to have together. He felt loved, and I think it was one of the first times in his life that he had that experience. He even made the astonishing statement that even though it was so hard to be in this 5-by-8 cell for 20-odd years, that he felt that the experience of knowing us and our believing in him made it worthwhile.
He truly sees value in his situation. What I mean by that is he was a guy that was working in a textile factory, didn't have many prospects in life at all. But through this experience, he has gotten to meet people that he never in his life would have ever met. Folks like Bob Morgenthau coming to his side to vocally advocate his support for Bill. He never would have met his wife but for the fact that he was incarcerated. And so he says, although I've lost so much by being in jail, look at how much I've gained. Where he is now is that he feels like if there was a lesson to be learned, it's learned. He's gotten it, and he's tired. He's 52. He still has a chance at life. I mean, this is a guy who we can still give him something. He doesn't have to lose everything.
Since the original trial, no court has been reviewed or has reviewed any of this evidence, despite repeated efforts by Kuenzel and his lawyers to get a court review of the newly discovered evidence. It's all failed. So here's a man on death row scheduled for death. I wrote the Attorney General, and I set out the facts, and I did it as tactfully as I could, and said to him that prosecutors may make mistakes, that I had made mistakes and convicted the wrong person. But what separates the man from the boys is the willingness to admit that you made a mistake and correct it. And I did that, and I was hoping that he would do that in this case, but he has not done that.
This is a case, speaking specifically about Bill, where my faith in the justice system is inextricably intertwined with this man getting out, because this is an injustice of horrific proportions. It is objectively clear to anyone who credibly examines this evidence that this man didn't get a fair trial. Leave aside whether you can believe 100% that he's innocent. And I believe that he is, and I think that the evidence shows conclusively that this man is 100% innocent. But leave that aside. You don't even have to believe that. You simply have to believe that this guy absolutely did not get a fair shake in our justice system. And I would challenge anyone to make the argument that this guy got a fair trial. And if he didn't get a fair trial, and it's clear he didn't get a fair trial, then how are we going to execute this man based on effectively a foot fault?
It's corrupt. And somebody has to do something about it.